Deep in the hollows of eastern Kentucky, where the morning mist clings to ancient ridgelines like whispered secrets, there exists a family name that local historians refuse to document. A bloodline so steeped in darkness that even mentioning their surname brings an uncomfortable silence to rooms full of grown men. For over a century, this clan has operated beyond the reach of law, beyond the bounds of human decency, and beyond the understanding of those who dare to investigate their legacy. The Appalachian Mountains have always harbored secrets. These ancient peaks, older than the bones of dinosaurs, have witnessed civilizations rise and fall, have sheltered outcasts and outlaws, and have kept the darkest chapters of American history buried beneath their misty shrouds. But among all the tales of feuding families, moonshine wars, and blood vendettas that echo through these valleys, one story stands apart. One family whose very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the limits of human depravity. Tonight, we're venturing into territory that maps refuse to acknowledge, where GPS signals mysteriously fail, and where even the most seasoned investigators have turned back in terror. We're uncovering the truth about a family whose influence extends far beyond their remote mountain stronghold, whose tentacles reach into the highest levels of government, and whose practices make the most notorious criminal organizations look like Sunday school teachers. This isn't just another tale of Appalachian violence. This is the story of systematic horror that has persisted for generations, protected by walls of silence built from equal parts fear and complicity. The evidence we've uncovered suggests connections to missing persons, cases spanning 5 decades, to political corruption that reaches the highest levels of state government, and to ritualistic practices that defy rational explanation. The family we're investigating tonight has managed to remain hidden in plain sight for over 100 years. They've survived federal investigations, weathered countless attempts to expose them, and eliminated anyone who came too close to the truth. Their story begins in the winter of 1923, when a single desperate decision in a forgotten hollow set in motion a chain of events that continues to this day. Local law enforcement files contain references to this family that read like something from a horror novel. Deputies who ventured too close to their territory during routine investigations were found days later, miles from where they disappeared, with no memory of how they got there. Federal agents assigned to investigate reports of their activities have requested immediate transfers after just days on the case. Even hardened criminals in the region speak their name only in whispers, crossing themselves as if warding off some ancient evil. What makes this family particularly terrifying isn't just their capacity for violence, though that is certainly documented. It's their intelligence, their organization, and their apparent ability to manipulate the very systems designed to stop them. They've infiltrated local government, corrupted law enforcement, and created a network of protection that extends far beyond their mountain stronghold. They operate with the efficiency of a corporation and the ruthlessness of a cartel, but with motivations that go far deeper than mere profit. The first credible documentation of their activities appears in a sheriff's report from 1924, though the family's origins likely stretch back much further. Deputy Marshal Thomas Whitfield wrote of discovering a homestead where the very air seemed wrong, where livestock refused to graze, and where the silence was so complete it felt like a living thing. His report, buried in county archives until recently, describes finding evidence of activities that he couldn't bring himself to fully document. Whitfield's investigation was cut short when he suffered what his family described as a complete mental breakdown. He spent his final years in a state asylum, speaking constantly of shadows that moved independently of light sources and of voices that called to him from the mountains. His medical records, obtained through a lengthy legal process, contain drawings he made during his confinement. Crude sketches of symbols that appear in no known language, of human figures arranged in patterns that seem to shift when viewed directly, and of landscapes that shouldn't exist in the Kentucky mountains. The family's influence began to expand significantly during the Great Depression, when desperation drove many mountain families to seek help from any source available. They offered assistance to struggling communities, provided food during harsh winters, and even funded local schools and churches. But their generosity came with prices that weren't immediately apparent. Families who accepted their help found themselves increasingly dependent, unable to break free from arrangements that seemed to grow more complex with each passing year. Children from families who dealt with them began displaying unusual behaviors. They would disappear for hours at a time, returning with no memory of where they'd been. They aged differently, some appearing decades older than their actual years, while others seemed frozen in time. Most disturbing were the reports of children speaking languages they'd never learned, demonstrating knowledge of events that occurred before their birth and displaying abilities that defied rational explanation. The family's reach extended beyond individual households to entire communities. Towns that fell under their influence experienced phenomena that couldn't be explained by conventional means. Livestock began producing offspring with genetic abnormalities that veterinarians couldn't identify. Crops grew with unnatural vigor in some areas while withering inexplicably in others. Weather patterns seemed to shift around their territory, with storms appearing and disappearing without meteorological explanation. Local churches began reporting strange occurrences during services. Bibles would open to pages that contained text in unknown languages. Crosses would tarnish overnight, despite being made of materials that shouldn't corrode. Ministers found themselves unable to deliver sermons when certain family members were present, as if the words themselves were being stripped from their minds. Several clergy members abandoned their posts entirely, leaving behind only cryptic notes about darkness that couldn't be dispelled by prayer. The family's business interests, on the surface, appeared legitimate. They operated timber mills, mining operations, and agricultural ventures that provided employment for hundreds of local residents. But workers began reporting strange requirements that had nothing to do with their actual jobs. They were asked to provide detailed information about their families, their health, and their personal histories. They were required to participate in what were described as team-building exercises that involved activities no rational employer would mandate. Those who questioned these requirements or attempted to leave their employment found themselves facing obstacles that seemed designed to trap them. Their children would fall ill with mysterious ailments that only the family's private physicians could treat. Their homes would suffer from inexplicable problems that required repairs only the family's contractors could provide. Their debts would mysteriously increase, creating financial obligations that made leaving impossible. The family's influence on local law enforcement became apparent through a series of incidents that should have triggered federal investigations, but somehow never did. Evidence from crime scenes would disappear from police custody. Witnesses would recant their testimony or disappear entirely. Officers who showed too much interest in the family's activities would find themselves reassigned to distant posts or facing disciplinary actions for minor infractions. One particularly disturbing case involved the disappearance of 3 teenage hikers in 1967. The last confirmed sighting placed them near the family's territory, but the official investigation concluded they had run away from home. The lead investigator, Detective Raymond Cross, privately disagreed with this conclusion and continued pursuing the case on his own time. His personal files, discovered after his death in 1989, contained evidence that suggested a very different fate for the missing teenagers. Cross had documented a pattern of disappearances stretching back decades, all involving young people who had ventured too close to the family's holdings. His notes describe finding physical evidence that was never officially reported, including personal items that showed signs of ritualistic use and locations that appeared to have been used for purposes that violated every law of human decency. His investigation ended abruptly when he suffered what appeared to be a stroke, though his medical records show no prior history of cardiovascular problems. The family's influence extended into the political realm through carefully cultivated relationships with local and state officials. They provided financial support for campaigns, offered lucrative contracts to businesses owned by political allies, and created a network of obligation that reached the highest levels of government. Politicians who accepted their support found themselves unable to oppose their interests, even when those interests clearly conflicted with public welfare. State records show a pattern of regulatory exemptions and special permissions granted to the family's business interests that wouldn't have been available to other organizations. Environmental regulations were waived for their mining operations. Safety inspections were routinely delayed or canceled for their facilities. Tax assessments were reduced through processes that left no paper trail. The family had created a system where they operated under different rules than everyone else, protected by a web of corruption that made them effectively untouchable. The scope of their influence became apparent during a brief federal investigation in the 1970s when a team of FBI agents attempted to examine their business practices. The investigation was terminated within weeks, with all files classified at the highest levels of government. The agents involved were reassigned to positions far from Kentucky, and several left the Bureau entirely shortly afterward. Official records of the investigation were sealed, and attempts to access them through Freedom of Information Act requests have been consistently denied on grounds of national security. The family's practices extended beyond mere corruption into realms that challenge our understanding of human behavior. Former employees who managed to escape their influence describe activities that read like something from a nightmare. They speak of ceremonies conducted in underground chambers carved from the mountain rock, of rituals that required participants to engage in acts that violated every principle of human dignity, and of consequences for those who refused to participate that were worse than death. These accounts, while difficult to verify, show remarkable consistency across multiple sources spanning several decades. The descriptions of locations, rituals, and participants match in ways that suggest either an elaborate conspiracy to create false evidence or the documentation of actual events that no civilized society should tolerate. The level of detail in these accounts, including specific architectural features, symbolic elements, and procedural sequences, suggests knowledge that couldn't have been fabricated by individuals working independently. The family's control over their territory was maintained through a combination of fear, dependence, and what can only be described as psychological manipulation on an unprecedented scale. They created a system where resistance was not just dangerous, but seemingly impossible. Those who attempted to oppose them found themselves facing obstacles that appeared designed to break their will rather than simply eliminate them. The message was clear. Death was not the worst fate that could befall someone who crossed this family. Their influence on the local population created a form of collective trauma that persists to this day. Multi-generational families in the region display behavioral patterns consistent with communities that have experienced prolonged exposure to systematic abuse. Children are taught from an early age not to venture into certain areas, not to ask questions about specific topics, and not to speak to outsiders about local affairs. The silence that surrounds this family isn't just fear, it's a learned survival mechanism passed down through generations. The family's legacy extends far beyond their immediate territory through a network of connections that reaches into major cities, other states, and possibly other countries. Former associates who have attempted to expose their activities describe an organization that operates on multiple levels, with legitimate business interests serving as cover for activities that serve darker purposes. The scope of their influence suggests resources and connections that go far beyond what a single family, regardless of their wealth, should be able to maintain. Recent developments suggest that the family's influence may be expanding rather than diminishing. Digital surveillance capabilities have made it easier for them to monitor potential threats and eliminate problems before they become serious. Their business interests have evolved to include technology companies, pharmaceutical research, and financial services that provide new avenues for the kind of control they've always sought. The methods may be more sophisticated, but the underlying objectives remain unchanged. The evidence we've gathered paints a picture of an organization that has successfully operated outside the bounds of law and human decency for over a century. They've created a system of protection that extends to the highest levels of government, maintained control over their territory through methods that defy rational explanation, and established a legacy of fear that continues to silence those who might otherwise speak out against them. Their story represents one of the darkest chapters in American history, a tale of systematic horror that has been deliberately hidden from public view. The evidence runs deeper than anyone imagined. By the 1950s, the five families had evolved beyond their original territories, their influence spreading like underground roots through the Appalachian coal veins themselves. What started as desperate bargains in forgotten hollows had transformed into something far more systematic, far more terrifying. The Holei Mining Corporation, never officially acknowledged the disappearance of the founding family in 1928, but company records from the following decades reveal a disturbing pattern. Every executive who attempted to modernize operations or investigate the sealed deep shafts suffered mysterious accidents. In 1943, mining engineer Robert Carlyle documented strange sounds emanating from collapsed sections of the mine. His final report, discovered in company archives decades later, contained increasingly erratic handwriting and sketches of symbols that matched no known mining terminology. Carlyle was found 3 days after submitting his report, his body discovered at the bottom of a shaft that had been sealed for 15 years. The coroner's report listed cause of death as accidental, though it failed to explain how he had accessed the sealed area or why his fingernails contained traces of coal dust that predated any known mining operations in the region. More troubling were the labor disputes that plagued competing mining operations throughout the 1940s and 50s. Workers at rival companies reported nightmares so vivid and consistent that union representatives began documenting them as evidence of psychological warfare. The dreams always featured the same elements: descending into impossibly deep shafts, hearing rhythmic tapping from sealed walls, and encountering figures that moved wrong in the darkness. Production at these competing mines dropped significantly as workers refused to enter certain areas, citing an overwhelming sense of being watched by something that existed just beyond the reach of their headlamps. The Carver timber empire expanded during this period with an efficiency that defied market analysis. While other logging operations struggled with environmental regulations and changing consumer demands, Carver crews consistently discovered pristine timber stands in areas that had been surveyed as barren. Their equipment rarely malfunctioned, their workers suffered fewer accidents, and their contracts always seemed to emerge victorious from competitive bidding processes. Industry analysts noted that Carver Timber's success rate was statistically impossible, yet no investigation ever uncovered evidence of corruption or insider trading. The cost of this supernatural prosperity became apparent in the company's personnel files. Every Carver employee, from executives to seasonal workers, reported the same recurring experience: children playing in the forests during active logging operations. These sightings followed a consistent pattern. Workers would glimpse movement in their peripheral vision, always just at the edge of the tree line. When they turned to look directly, they would see children, usually 3 or 4, wearing clothes that seemed decades out of date. The children would wave or beckon before disappearing behind trees. Workers who attempted to approach these areas would find themselves disoriented, often discovering they had walked in circles for hours despite following what appeared to be straight paths. More disturbing were the accidents that befell those who spoke too openly about these encounters. Heavy machinery would malfunction in ways that safety inspectors couldn't explain. Trees would fall in impossible directions, defying wind patterns and cutting techniques. Workers would find themselves trapped in areas they knew intimately, their compasses spinning wildly, their radio communications filled with what sounded like children's laughter mixed with static. The Lowell healing tradition evolved during this period into something that transcended conventional medicine. By the 1960s, the family had established a network of practitioners throughout the Cumberland Mountains, each operating small clinics that gained reputations for miraculous recoveries. These healers, always descended from the original Margaret Lowell, shared common characteristics that set them apart from conventional medical practitioners. They aged at an accelerated rate, their bodies bearing the accumulated strain of thousands of illnesses they had absorbed from patients. Their diagnostic abilities bordered on the supernatural, often identifying conditions before patients experienced symptoms. Most unnervingly, they all reported visitations from what they termed the patient, an entity that appeared in different forms but always sought healing for wounds that never closed. Dr. Hannah Lowell, who operated a clinic in Hazard, Kentucky from 1955 to 1972, kept detailed records of these encounters. Her journals, discovered after her mysterious disappearance, described increasingly frequent visits from this entity. Initially appearing as a child with hollow eyes, it would manifest in her clinic during the darkest hours of night, always requesting treatment for injuries that seemed to shift and change as she observed them. Sometimes it appeared as an elderly person with skin like cracked leather, other times as something barely recognizable as human. The entity's wounds defied medical explanation, burns that seemed to heal and reopen in endless cycles, lacerations that bled substances that weren't quite blood, broken bones that mended at impossible angles only to fracture again in new locations. Dr. Lowell's final entries describe her growing realization that the entity wasn't seeking healing in any conventional sense, but rather feeding on the pain and suffering she absorbed from her patients. The last entry in her journal, dated 3 days before her disappearance, reads, "It spoke to me tonight, not with words, but directly into my mind. It said the pain I carry belongs to it, that I am merely a vessel for its nourishment. I understand now why the tradition passes from mother to daughter, why none of us live past 50. We are not healers. We are farmers, cultivating suffering for something that feeds on human misery." The Thornton Coal Dynasty's expansion into natural gas and renewable energy in the 1990s coincided with a series of environmental anomalies that government agencies struggled to explain. Geological surveys of former Thornton mining sites revealed underground chambers that shouldn't exist, cavities that extended far beyond the documented mining operations. Seismic activity in these areas followed patterns that didn't match known geological processes, with vibrations that seemed to originate from depths that exceeded the region's bedrock formations. Environmental Protection Agency investigators documented strange readings from monitoring equipment placed near former Thornton properties. Electromagnetic fields fluctuated in rhythmic patterns that resembled biological functions rather than geological phenomena. Ground-penetrating radar revealed structures beneath the earth that appeared to be constructed rather than naturally formed, though their purpose remained unclear. The agency's final report, heavily redacted and classified until 2019, included testimony from EPA scientist Dr. Maria Santos, who led the investigation team. Her account described discovering entrance points to underground chambers that had been sealed with materials that predated known mining operations. When her team attempted to access these areas, their equipment malfunctioned in ways that suggested deliberate interference rather than random failure. Most disturbing was her description of sounds recorded by sensitive audio equipment placed near these sealed entrances. The recordings, which were confiscated by federal authorities and never released to the public, allegedly contained what Dr. Santos described as conversations in languages that don't exist, punctuated by sounds that resembled breathing from something far larger than human lungs. The Whitaker musical legacy continued to influence the entertainment industry in ways that defied conventional explanation. Record executives, producers, and musicians who worked with Whitaker compositions reported experiences that transcended normal creative processes. The music seemed to write itself, with melodies and harmonies appearing in their minds fully formed, often accompanied by visual hallucinations of ancient forests and entities that move just beyond human perception. These compositions possessed an addictive quality that affected both performers and audiences. Musicians who played Whitaker pieces found themselves unable to perform other music, claiming that conventional songs felt hollow and lifeless by comparison. Audiences at concerts featuring these works reported shared experiences that suggested the music was altering their consciousness in ways that exceeded normal emotional responses. The most documented case involved the Nashville Symphony Orchestra's 1998 performance of a piece discovered in the abandoned Whitaker compound. The composition, titled The Composer's Lament, was found written on sheet music that appeared to be centuries old, though the musical notation included symbols that didn't correspond to any known system. During the performance, audience members reported experiencing collective visions of a figure playing violin in a cave, its shadow growing larger with each note until it seemed to fill the entire concert hall. The performance had to be stopped when several audience members collapsed, though medical examinations found no physical cause for their conditions. More disturbing were the reports from those who attended that they could still hear the music playing in their minds weeks after the concert, a phenomenon that persisted despite attempts at medical and psychological intervention. The true scope of these families' influence became apparent through their interconnections. Marriage records, business partnerships, and property transactions revealed a web of relationships that extended throughout the Appalachian region and beyond. The families had not operated in isolation, but had formed alliances that amplified their individual capabilities. The Hole mining operations supplied coal exclusively to facilities connected to the other families. Carver Timber provided materials for construction projects that always seemed to benefit family interests. Thornton Energy's renewable installations were strategically positioned near locations significant to the other bloodlines. The pattern suggested coordination that spanned generations, a long-term strategy that transcended individual family interests. Most troubling were the genealogical connections discovered by researchers attempting to trace the family's origins. DNA analysis of hair samples and personal items recovered from abandoned properties revealed genetic markers that shouldn't exist in human populations. The families shared genetic characteristics that suggested either common ancestry from an unknown source or exposure to environmental factors that had altered their hereditary material in ways that science couldn't explain. These genetic anomalies were passed down through generations, creating bloodlines that were distinctly different from surrounding populations. Children born into these families exhibited enhanced sensory capabilities, unusual resistance to environmental hazards, and psychological traits that set them apart from their communities. They aged differently, healed faster, and possessed intuitive knowledge of subjects they had never studied. The family's influence extended into modern technology sectors through strategic investments and partnerships that seemed to anticipate market trends decades in advance. Silicon Valley companies with mysterious Appalachian backing emerged as industry leaders, their innovations often incorporating principles that researchers claimed were theoretically impossible with current understanding of physics and engineering. Government agencies tasked with investigating these connections found their efforts consistently thwarted by bureaucratic obstacles, missing records, and personnel changes that seemed to occur whenever investigations gained momentum. Witnesses would recant their statements, evidence would disappear from secure facilities, and investigators would request transfers to other departments, citing personal reasons that they were unable to articulate clearly. The families had evolved beyond their original supernatural bargains into something that resembled a shadow government, their influence extending through networks that touched every aspect of American society. They had learned to operate within legal frameworks while maintaining their supernatural advantages, creating a hybrid system that combined ancient powers with modern institutional authority. Their success lay not in direct confrontation with established systems, but in subtle infiltration and gradual influence. They didn't seek to overthrow existing power structures, but to hollow them out from within, creating shells of legitimate authority that served their deeper purposes. The result was a network of influence that was simultaneously visible and invisible, operating in plain sight while remaining fundamentally hidden from those who might oppose it. The true horror of their legacy wasn't the supernatural elements that had granted them power, but the systematic way they had woven those elements into the fabric of American society. They had transformed from desperate families making bargains in dark hollows into architects of a shadow system that influenced everything from local politics to global markets, all while maintaining the appearance of normal, if successful, American dynasties. Their story reveals how power, once acquired through supernatural means, can be systematically expanded and legitimized through conventional channels, creating hybrid systems that are far more dangerous than either supernatural or conventional power alone. The families had succeeded in creating something unprecedented, a supernatural oligarchy operating within democratic institutions, wielding ancient powers through modern systems of control. What makes this particular family so untouchable isn't just their century-old supernatural connections or their carefully cultivated network of political influence. It's their complete integration into the technological age, their ability to adapt ancient practices to modern systems of control. While other mountain clans faded into folklore, this family evolved, embedding themselves so deeply into contemporary American infrastructure that exposing them would require dismantling institutions most people consider fundamental to society. Their transformation began in the 1960s when the third generation recognized that traditional isolation would eventually lead to discovery and destruction. Unlike their predecessors, who relied solely on geographic remoteness and local intimidation, they began systematically infiltrating universities, government agencies, and emerging technology companies. The family's children, raised with both supernatural abilities and exceptional intelligence, were strategically placed in positions where they could influence policy, research, and development from within. By the 1980s, family members held key positions in the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, and several major pharmaceutical companies. Their influence extended beyond individual careers. They had become architects of regulatory frameworks, designers of research protocols, and advisors to congressional committees. Every environmental study conducted in eastern Kentucky passed through channels they controlled. Every mining permit, every land development project, every federal investigation required approval from systems they had helped create. The family's most brilliant adaptation was their entry into the emerging computer industry. While most Americans were just beginning to understand personal computers, family members were already working at Bell Labs, IBM, and the early iterations of what would become Silicon Valley. They didn't just participate in the digital revolution, they helped design it, ensuring that the fundamental architecture of American information systems contained pathways they could access and control. Their supernatural abilities, rather than being abandoned as primitive, were refined and amplified through technology. The enhanced perception that allowed them to sense approaching threats was extended through networks of surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and data collection systems. Their ability to influence human behavior, once limited to direct contact, was now channeled through carefully designed algorithms that could subtly manipulate millions of people simultaneously. The family's descendants today don't live in isolated mountain cabins. They reside in suburban homes, indistinguishable from their neighbors, drive ordinary cars, and maintain active social media profiles. They work as software engineers, data analysts, federal contractors, and university researchers. Their children attend prestigious schools, their spouses hold professional positions, and their extended network includes senators, judges, corporate executives, and intelligence officials. What makes them truly dangerous in the modern era is their patience and their multi-generational planning. While other criminal organizations think in terms of immediate profit or short-term advantage, this family plans in decades and centuries. Every technological advancement, every shift in political power, every change in social structure is anticipated and prepared for. They don't react to events. They create the conditions that make certain events inevitable. Their influence on the internet age cannot be overstated. Family members were involved in the development of early search algorithms, social media platforms, and data collection systems. They helped design the privacy policies, user agreements, and data sharing protocols that most people accept without reading. Through their positions at major technology companies, they have access to communication patterns, location data, financial transactions, and personal information for hundreds of millions of Americans. The family's modern operations center around something they call the Integration Project, a multifaceted plan to merge their supernatural abilities with artificial intelligence systems. Using their positions in tech companies and government agencies, they have been feeding data about human behavior, decision-making patterns, and psychological vulnerabilities into machine learning algorithms. The goal is to create predictive models so sophisticated that they can anticipate and influence human behavior on a massive scale. Their supernatural artifacts, once simple objects of power, have been integrated into technological systems. Ancient stones that once required physical proximity to exert influence have been ground into powders and incorporated into manufacturing processes for electronic devices. Metals with unusual properties have been alloyed into components for communication networks. Organic materials with psychoactive properties have been synthesized and incorporated into pharmaceutical products. The family's financial resources, accumulated over generations, have been invested in a diverse portfolio of companies, real estate holdings, and government contracts. They own significant stakes in renewable energy companies, pharmaceutical manufacturers, data processing firms, and military contractors. Their wealth is hidden behind layers of shell companies, charitable foundations, and investment vehicles that make it nearly impossible to trace their true economic influence. Most disturbing is their recruitment and cultivation of new members. The family has developed sophisticated psychological profiles for identifying individuals with the potential to develop supernatural abilities. They monitor genetic databases, psychological evaluations, and behavioral patterns to locate candidates. These individuals are then gradually introduced to the family's network through seemingly innocent professional opportunities, academic programs, or social connections. The integration process is subtle and often spans years. Promising candidates are offered attractive positions, research grants, or business opportunities that slowly draw them deeper into the family's sphere of influence. By the time they realize the true nature of their benefactors, they have been compromised through their participation in questionable research projects, their access to classified information, or their dependence on family resources. The family's modern stronghold isn't a single location, but a distributed network of facilities across the United States. They maintain research laboratories disguised as environmental monitoring stations, data centers masked as telecommunications facilities, and residential compounds that appear to be executive retreats or private schools. These locations are connected through encrypted communication networks, underground transportation systems, and shared resource pools. Their influence extends into every aspect of American society. The algorithms that determine what news stories people see, what products they're offered, and what information they can access have been subtly modified to serve the family's interests. The data collected by smartphones, fitness trackers, and home automation systems flows through processing centers where family members can identify potential threats, locate valuable resources, and monitor the effectiveness of their influence operations. The family's relationship with law enforcement and intelligence agencies is particularly complex. They don't simply evade these organizations. They have helped design many of the systems and protocols these agencies use. Family members have contributed to the development of surveillance technologies, data analysis methods, and investigation procedures. They have influenced the training curricula for federal agents, the software used for criminal investigations, and the legal frameworks that govern domestic surveillance. This level of integration makes traditional law enforcement approaches ineffective. Investigations that might expose the family's activities are detected early through their access to communication networks and database systems. Evidence that might incriminate them is identified and eliminated before it can be collected. Witnesses who might testify against them are located and neutralized through means that appear accidental or natural. The family's greatest strength in the modern era is their invisibility. They have become so thoroughly integrated into American society that distinguishing them from legitimate institutions is nearly impossible. Their influence is exercised through systems that appear democratic and transparent, but contain hidden mechanisms of control. Their supernatural abilities are channeled through technologies that seem beneficial and progressive, but serve hidden purposes. The few investigators who have attempted to expose the family's modern operations have encountered obstacles that seem to emerge from the very structure of society itself. Research grants are mysteriously revoked, employment opportunities disappear, housing becomes unavailable, and personal relationships deteriorate. The harassment doesn't come from obvious sources, but from the ordinary functioning of institutions that suddenly seem to work against specific individuals. What makes this family truly terrifying isn't their supernatural powers or their technological capabilities. It's their complete integration into the systems that govern modern life. They have become indistinguishable from the infrastructure of American society, making their exposure virtually impossible without fundamentally altering the way the country functions. They represent the evolution of ancient evil into modern form, a supernatural oligarchy that has learned to hide in plain sight while maintaining absolute control over the systems that shape human civilization. What most people don't understand about this particular bloodline is how they've managed to completely rewrite the rules of control in the 21st century. While other criminal organizations fumbled with digital transitions, they were already 3 steps ahead, having anticipated the shift decades before it happened. By the time law enforcement agencies began developing cybercrime units, this family had already embedded themselves so deeply into the digital infrastructure that removing them would be like trying to extract individual threads from a tapestry without destroying the entire fabric. Their mastery of modern systems isn't just about having good hackers on payroll. It's about understanding that true power in the digital age comes from being indispensable to the systems that everyone else depends on. They don't just use technology, they've become part of it. Their influence flows through fiber optic cables, satellite networks, and server farms scattered across the globe. When you check your bank balance, stream a video, or use GPS navigation, there's a non-zero chance that your data is touching infrastructure they control or influence. The pharmaceutical angle represents perhaps their most insidious evolution. Through a network of shell companies, research partnerships, and regulatory capture, they've positioned themselves within the drug development pipeline, not as obvious owners, but as silent partners whose interests align with keeping certain populations dependent. Rural communities across Appalachia report unusually high rates of specific chronic conditions that require lifelong medication management. The medications are always available, always affordable through mysterious assistance programs, and always manufactured by companies that can be traced back to the same financial networks. Their understanding of addiction extends far beyond traditional substances. They've pioneered what intelligence analysts quietly call behavioral pharmacology, the science of making people dependent on systems, routines, and information sources. The algorithm modifications they've made to social media platforms don't just promote their content, they create psychological dependency patterns that make users more susceptible to suggestion and less likely to question inconsistencies in their environment. The genetic component of their operation has evolved into something that would make science fiction writers nervous. Through carefully orchestrated breeding programs that span multiple generations, they've cultivated bloodlines with enhanced capabilities for specific functions. Some family branches show exceptional aptitude for financial manipulation, able to spot market patterns and opportunities that escape conventional analysis. Others demonstrate uncanny abilities in technological integration, as if they instinctively understand complex systems without formal training. These genetic modifications aren't random mutations. They're the result of deliberate exposure to substances and energies found in their ancestral territories, combined with selective breeding practices that would horrify bioethicists. Children born into certain family lines undergo rituals in underground chambers where they're exposed to electromagnetic fields, mineral compounds, and other elements that alter their neurological development in subtle but significant ways. The most disturbing aspect is how they've weaponized empathy itself. Through sophisticated psychological profiling, they identify individuals in positions of influence who have specific emotional vulnerabilities. A judge struggling with a sick child might find anonymous donations appearing to cover medical expenses. A senator dealing with elderly parents discovers that a particular assisted living facility offers exceptional care at remarkably affordable rates. These aren't bribes in the traditional sense. They're emotional investments that create unconscious loyalty bonds. Their network of influence extends into educational institutions through endowments, research grants, and scholarship programs that shape the next generation of leaders. Students who receive their support often find themselves guided toward careers in key industries, government positions, or academic roles where they can later provide useful services. The recipients usually have no idea who their real benefactors are, making the influence network virtually impossible to trace or dismantle. The technology sector has become their primary playground. Through strategic investments, they've gained influence over companies that manufacture critical components for everything from smartphones to military equipment. A single family member operating under multiple identities might hold board positions at companies that appear to be competitors, but are actually part of a coordinated strategy to control entire market segments. Their approach to law enforcement corruption has evolved beyond simple bribery. They've developed systems for identifying and nurturing individuals who are naturally inclined toward compromise. A young police officer struggling with student loans might receive an anonymous scholarship to complete their degree. A detective facing family medical bills discovers that certain cases come with unusual overtime opportunities. Federal agents find that their most successful investigations somehow always laid away from the family's core interests. The supernatural elements of their operation have become increasingly sophisticated. The rituals performed in underground chambers now incorporate technology that amplifies and focuses whatever energies they're manipulating. Electromagnetic field generators, precisely tuned acoustic systems, and crystalline structures that seem to store and redirect ambient energy all play roles in ceremonies that blend ancient practices with cutting-edge science. Their ability to predict and manipulate market movements has reached levels that suggest access to information that shouldn't exist. They seem to know about natural disasters, political upheavals, and economic shifts before they happen, allowing them to position their investments for maximum advantage. Whether this comes from their supernatural practices, extremely sophisticated intelligence gathering, or a combination of both, the result is the same. They always seem to be on the winning side of major economic events. The family's influence over media narratives has become so sophisticated that they can shape public opinion without anyone realizing they're being influenced. Through carefully crafted social media campaigns, strategically placed news stories, and viral content that appears to emerge organically, they can direct public attention toward or away from specific topics. When investigations get too close to their operations, suddenly other stories dominate the news cycle, drawing attention elsewhere. Their recruitment methods have evolved to target individuals who don't even know they're being recruited. Through social media monitoring, they identify people with specific psychological profiles, personal vulnerabilities, or useful skills. These individuals then find themselves presented with opportunities that seem too good to pass up. A struggling programmer might receive a job offer from a company they've never heard of, but the salary is excellent and the work seems legitimate. Only later do they realize they've been integrated into a much larger and more sinister operation. The family has also mastered the art of creating beneficial chaos. By deliberately introducing minor disruptions into systems they control, they create problems that only they can solve, making themselves increasingly indispensable to the infrastructure they're parasitically attached to. When a critical system fails, they're always ready with a solution that coincidentally expands their access and influence. Their understanding of human psychology has reached levels that border on the supernatural. They can predict individual behavior with uncanny accuracy, allowing them to manipulate outcomes in ways that appear to be natural consequences rather than deliberate interventions. A politician who opposes their interests might find themselves facing a series of seemingly unrelated personal crises that force them to reconsider their positions. The most chilling aspect of their modern evolution is how they've made themselves necessary to the functioning of society itself. They're not just parasites feeding off existing systems, they've become integral components of the infrastructure that keeps modern life functioning. Removing them would cause cascading failures across multiple sectors, making them essentially immune to conventional law enforcement approaches. Their influence over emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing suggests they're already preparing for the next phase of their evolution. They understand that whoever controls these technologies will shape the future of human civilization, and they're positioning themselves to be the invisible hands guiding that development. The family's ability to operate simultaneously in the physical and digital realms, combining ancient supernatural practices with cutting-edge technology, has created something unprecedented in human history. They represented a new form of power that transcends traditional categories of organized crime, corporate influence, or even governmental authority. They've become something that existing legal and social frameworks simply aren't equipped to address. Now we must understand that their influence didn't emerge overnight. These families discovered something profound about power itself. True control isn't maintained through force or fear alone. It requires becoming indispensable to the very systems that govern society. Like a skilled surgeon who knows exactly which arteries to cut, they identified the critical infrastructure points where their removal would cause catastrophic failure. Consider the financial sector. While most people think of Wall Street as the heart of American finance, the real control lies in the smaller regional banks that process the day-to-day transactions of rural America. These institutions, often overlooked by federal regulators, became perfect vehicles for their influence. They didn't buy these banks outright. Instead, they became the mysterious benefactors who appeared during times of crisis, offering capital injections that saved failing institutions. The grateful bank presidents never questioned where the money originated. They simply knew that certain loans would always be approved, certain investments would always be protected, and certain questions would never be asked. Their agricultural dominance follows a similar pattern. They don't own the largest farms or the most obvious agricultural corporations. Instead, they control the seed companies, the fertilizer distributors, the equipment manufacturers, and the commodity traders. A farmer in Iowa thinks he's making independent decisions about his crops, but every choice has been subtly influenced by companies that trace back to shell corporations registered in the hollows of Kentucky. The seeds he plants carry genetic modifications that ensure dependence on specific fertilizers. The equipment he uses requires proprietary parts available only through authorized dealers. The markets where he sells his harvest are influenced by trading algorithms that respond to data points he never sees. The pharmaceutical industry proved particularly receptive to their methods. Rural communities have always relied on traditional remedies, creating a perfect bridge between ancient knowledge and modern drug development. They established research facilities disguised as wellness retreats in remote mountain locations. Here they combined centuries of herbal wisdom with cutting-edge biotechnology. The compounds they developed don't just treat symptoms, they create subtle dependencies, ensuring that patients require ongoing treatment while appearing to improve their conditions. More disturbing, certain medications seem designed to enhance susceptibility to suggestion, making populations more receptive to specific forms of influence. Their technological integration represents perhaps their most sophisticated achievement. While Silicon Valley companies compete for market dominance, these families embedded themselves into the fundamental infrastructure of digital communication. They don't own the major tech companies. Instead, they control the server farms, the fiber optic networks, the data centers, and the security protocols that make modern communication possible. Every email, every social media post, every digital transaction passes through systems they influence. They've developed artificial intelligence algorithms that can identify and manipulate individual psychological profiles based on digital behavior patterns. These systems don't just collect data, they actively shape the information people receive, gradually molding public opinion and individual decision-making processes. The energy sector showcases their ability to anticipate and profit from societal transitions. Decades before climate change became a mainstream concern, they were quietly positioning themselves in renewable energy technologies. They didn't wait for government subsidies or public demand. Instead, they developed proprietary methods for solar panel manufacturing, wind turbine design, and battery storage that remain decades ahead of publicly available technology. When the world began transitioning away from fossil fuels, they were already positioned to control the new energy infrastructure. Their solar panels produce efficiency rates that violate known laws of physics. Their wind turbines generate power even in minimal wind conditions. Their battery systems store energy in ways that conventional chemistry cannot explain. The mining industry remains their most direct connection to their origins. Coal mining taught them that the most valuable resources often lie in the most inaccessible places. They've expanded this principle globally, acquiring mineral rights in locations that appear worthless to conventional surveys. Their geological knowledge extends beyond standard mining techniques. They seem to understand the Earth's composition in ways that allow them to locate rare elements essential for modern technology. The lithium for electric car batteries, the rare earth elements for smartphone components, the precious metals for computer processors, all trace back to mining operations they control. More mysteriously, their extraction methods produce minimal environmental impact, suggesting technologies that conventional mining companies cannot access. Their media influence operates through carefully constructed layers of separation. They don't own major news networks or publishing houses. Instead, they control the companies that provide essential services to media organizations. The printing presses, the distribution networks, the advertising platforms, the subscription management systems all connect to their network. They've developed sophisticated methods for influencing public discourse without direct censorship. Instead of suppressing information, they flood the marketplace with carefully crafted alternatives that crowd out unwanted narratives. Their psychological research allows them to create content that appears to offer multiple perspectives while actually guiding audiences toward predetermined conclusions. The educational system proves surprisingly vulnerable to their influence. Rural communities have always valued practical knowledge over theoretical education, creating opportunities for alternative learning approaches. They established private schools and homeschooling networks that appear to offer superior education while actually serving as recruitment and training grounds. Students in these programs demonstrate remarkable academic achievement, but their curricula include subjects not found in traditional schools. Advanced mathematics that incorporates principles of energy manipulation. History lessons that reveal connections between seemingly unrelated events. Science courses that explore phenomena that mainstream academia dismisses as impossible. These students enter prestigious universities and successful careers, but they carry with them knowledge and loyalties that serve the family's broader purposes. Their healthcare network extends far beyond traditional medicine. They've established wellness centers, research facilities, and treatment programs that attract patients seeking alternatives to conventional healthcare. These facilities achieve remarkable success rates, treating conditions that stump traditional medicine. Cancer patients experience complete remissions. Neurological disorders that should be progressive instead show improvement. Mental health conditions that typically require lifelong medication resolve entirely. The treatments combine ancient herbal knowledge with advanced biotechnology, creating results that appear miraculous to conventional medical understanding. Patients who experience these healings become devoted advocates, creating networks of influence that extend into every community. The legal system requires more subtle manipulation than other sectors. They cannot directly control judges or prosecutors without risking exposure. Instead, they've developed methods for influencing legal outcomes through seemingly legitimate channels. Court clerks who lose crucial documents, witnesses who suddenly become unavailable, evidence that disappears from secured storage facilities, legal precedents that get overlooked by research assistants, appeals that get delayed through administrative errors. These interventions appear random to outside observers, but they follow patterns that ensure favorable outcomes for their interests while maintaining the appearance of normal legal processes. Their international operations demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of global power structures. They don't seek to control foreign governments directly. Instead, they embed themselves into the economic and technological systems that modern nations depend upon. The shipping companies that transport international trade, the communication satellites that enable global connectivity, the financial networks that process international transactions, the technological standards that govern global compatibility. By controlling these foundational elements, they can influence international relations without appearing to interfere in foreign affairs. The most disturbing aspect of their influence lies in its self-perpetuating nature. Each generation becomes more sophisticated than the last, not through traditional education, but through methods that seem to directly transfer knowledge and abilities. Children born into these families demonstrate capabilities that appear impossible for their age. They understand complex systems intuitively. They anticipate social and economic changes with uncanny accuracy. They form relationships with influential people who should be far beyond their social reach. As they mature, they seamlessly integrate into the networks their families have spent generations building, expanding, and refining systems of control that become increasingly difficult to detect or resist. What makes their influence so effective is that it rarely feels like coercion. Instead, it appears as opportunity, convenience, and natural progression. A struggling farmer receives an offer to participate in a new agricultural program that promises increased yields. A small business owner gets approached by an investor offering expansion capital with unusually favorable terms. A student receives a scholarship to attend a prestigious school they never applied to. A researcher discovers that funding becomes available for projects that align with certain interests. These opportunities seem like fortunate coincidences, but they're actually carefully orchestrated steps in a larger plan that guides society toward outcomes these families have predetermined. The true scope of their influence becomes apparent only when you recognize that they've created a system where opposition is not just difficult, but literally unthinkable. They've shaped the very frameworks through which people understand reality, the economic theories taught in universities, the scientific methodologies used in research, the technological standards that govern innovation, the social norms that define acceptable behavior. These aren't neutral systems that emerged naturally. They're carefully constructed tools that channel human activity toward outcomes that serve their interests while maintaining the illusion of free choice and open competition. Their greatest achievement lies in making themselves invisible. They've created a world where their influence appears to be the natural order of things. People accept current systems as inevitable rather than recognizing them as deliberately constructed. This invisibility provides perfect protection because you cannot resist what you cannot see. Even those who sense that something is wrong struggle to identify the source of their unease. They find themselves fighting symptoms rather than causes, battling individual problems rather than recognizing the systematic nature of their manipulation. The implications of this realization are staggering. If these families have indeed achieved this level of influence, then virtually every aspect of modern life operates according to their design. The jobs we work, the products we buy, the information we receive, the choices we make, the futures we envision, all serve purposes that extend far beyond our individual understanding. We believe we're living our own lives, but we're actually playing roles in a drama these families have been writing for over a century. But the real horror began when their reach extended beyond the physical realm into the digital infrastructure that binds our modern world together. The family's supernatural influence didn't stop at controlling politicians, judges, and corporate executives. They understood that true power in the 21st century flows through fiber optic cables, satellite networks, and the invisible streams of data that govern every aspect of human existence. In 2003, when the first major internet service providers began expanding into rural Kentucky, something unprecedented happened. Construction crews reported equipment failures that followed no logical pattern. Fiber optic cables would mysteriously reroute themselves overnight, creating pathways that engineers never designed. Server farms built in the region experienced inexplicable performance boosts, processing data at rates that defied the specifications of their hardware. Local technicians whispered about finding strange symbols carved into the concrete foundations of cell towers, markings that seemed to pulse with their own faint luminescence. The family had discovered that their ancient rituals could interface with modern technology in ways that Silicon Valley's brightest minds couldn't comprehend. They learned to infuse their blood sacrifices with rare earth minerals, creating a hybrid offering that somehow enhanced electromagnetic fields. Server rooms in their territory became temples where cutting-edge processors were baptized in solutions containing human DNA and trace amounts of uranium extracted from their mountain holdings. What emerged was a technological necromancy that allowed them to manipulate information itself. Search engine results would subtly shift to favor businesses under their control. Social media algorithms would suppress content that threatened their interests while amplifying messages that served their agenda. Dating apps would nudge compatible partners toward each other, but only if both individuals carried genetic markers that the family found useful for their breeding programs. The family's digital tentacles reached into financial networks with devastating precision. High-frequency trading algorithms would execute microsecond transactions that siphoned fractions of pennies from millions of trades, accumulating vast wealth while leaving no traceable footprint. Cryptocurrency mining operations in their territory achieved impossible efficiency rates, as if the blockchain itself bent to their will. Bank loan algorithms would mysteriously approve applications from their associates while denying credit to those who posed potential threats. Healthcare databases became particularly valuable tools for their expansion. Medical records would be subtly altered to hide the unusual longevity and genetic anomalies present in their bloodlines. Insurance companies would receive manipulated actuarial data that made their enemies appear as high-risk clients, while their allies received premium rates. Most disturbing were the fertility clinic databases, where genetic screening results would be modified to encourage specific reproductive pairings that served the family's long-term genetic engineering goals. Educational institutions found their digital systems compromised in ways that shaped entire generations. Standardized test scores would be adjusted to ensure that children from their bloodlines received placement in elite programs. College admission algorithms would favor applicants with specific genetic markers, creating a pipeline of influence that stretched from kindergarten through graduate school. Academic research databases would bury studies that might reveal their activities while promoting research that supported their narrative of environmental protection and sustainable development. The family's influence over communication networks enabled surveillance capabilities that would make intelligence agencies envious. Every phone call, text message, and email passing through their territory was analyzed by artificial intelligence systems trained on patterns of human behavior collected over decades. They could predict individual actions with uncanny accuracy, knowing when someone was planning to investigate their activities, preparing to relocate, or beginning to suspect the truth about their operations. Social media platforms became psychological laboratories where the family conducted mass experiments in human behavior modification. They would introduce subtle changes to news feeds, slightly altering the emotional tone of content to influence public opinion on issues affecting their interests. Political movements would be artificially amplified or suppressed through coordinated bot networks that operated with sophistication far beyond typical state-sponsored disinformation campaigns. The family's technological capabilities extended into the realm of biological monitoring through wearable devices and health tracking applications. Fitness trackers in their territory would collect biometric data that revealed stress patterns, sleep cycles, and physiological responses to various stimuli. This information was fed into predictive models that could identify individuals likely to become whistleblowers, investigators, or other potential threats to their operations. Smart home devices became surveillance tools that monitored not just conversations, but behavioral patterns within private residences. The family could detect changes in routine that might indicate someone was planning to leave their territory, preparing to contact authorities, or exhibiting signs of psychological resistance to their influence. Home security systems would mysteriously malfunction when the family needed access to specific properties, while perfectly documenting any unauthorized intrusions by their enemies. Transportation networks fell under their digital control through manipulation of GPS systems, traffic management algorithms, and vehicle tracking databases. Investigators attempting to reach their territory would find themselves routed through circuitous paths that added hours to their journey, while family associates enjoyed mysteriously smooth travel with every traffic light perfectly timed in their favor. Commercial shipping algorithms would prioritize deliveries to their businesses while delaying supplies to their competitors. The family's integration with digital infrastructure created feedback loops that amplified their power exponentially. Every new device connected to the internet in their territory became a potential sensor in their surveillance network. Every software update could carry hidden modifications that served their purposes. Every database they accessed became a tool for extending their influence into previously untouchable institutions. Government agencies found their own systems compromised by intrusions that left no digital fingerprints. Federal databases would experience selective corruption, losing records related to the family's activities while preserving everything else with perfect integrity. Whistleblower protection systems would malfunction when someone attempted to report their crimes, routing sensitive information directly to the family's associates within the bureaucracy. International communications networks became conduits for the family's global expansion. Submarine internet cables passing near their territory would experience performance anomalies that somehow enhanced their ability to monitor and manipulate international data flows. Satellite communication systems would develop blind spots that coincided perfectly with the family's most sensitive operations, while providing crystal clear coverage for their legitimate business activities. The family's technological mastery extended into the realm of artificial intelligence, where they deployed machine learning systems trained on datasets that included decades of human behavioral data collected through their various monitoring operations. These AI systems could predict market trends, political outcomes, and social movements with accuracy that seemed supernatural but was actually the result of having access to information streams that no other entity could match. Most terrifying was their development of what they called digital bloodlines, algorithms that could trace genetic and behavioral patterns through social media connections, purchase histories, and communication patterns. These systems could identify distant relatives, predict genetic predispositions, and even suggest optimal breeding pairs for maintaining their supernatural traits across generations. The family's digital empire operates with the same ruthless efficiency as their traditional power structures, but with the added advantage of being nearly invisible to conventional oversight. They have created a parallel internet that runs alongside the public network, processing information and executing commands through pathways that exist in the gaps between official protocols and regulated systems. Ooh. Their technological capabilities have reached the point where they can manipulate reality itself through digital means. Social media narratives become truth through repetition and algorithmic amplification. Financial markets move in response to their carefully crafted information campaigns. Political movements rise and fall based on their strategic manipulation of communication networks. The family has achieved something unprecedented in human history. They have merged ancient supernatural power with cutting-edge technology to create a form of control that operates simultaneously in the physical and digital realms. They are no longer simply an Appalachian crime family or even a supernatural entity hiding in the mountains. They have become something far more dangerous, a force that can shape reality itself by controlling the information systems that define how modern humans understand and interact with the world. Their influence flows through every smartphone, every smart TV, every connected device that has become integral to contemporary life. They have transformed the internet from a tool of human liberation into an instrument of their dominion, creating a digital prison that most people don't even realize they're trapped within. The family's evolution into digital overlords represents the ultimate convergence of ancient power and modern capability. They have proven that supernatural influence can adapt to any technological advancement, becoming stronger and more pervasive with each innovation that was supposed to democratize information and empower individuals. The mountains never forget, but some memories are too dangerous to preserve. In 2003, a digital forensics expert working for the Department of Homeland Security discovered something that made her resign within 48 hours. Buried in routine surveillance data from cell towers across eastern Kentucky, she found communication patterns that defied explanation. Encrypted transmissions using protocols that shouldn't exist, coordinated across hundreds of devices in areas where official records showed no cell coverage. The data suggested a network so sophisticated it made government systems look primitive. Her final report, classified at the highest levels, contained a single recommendation: do not investigate further. This discovery marked the beginning of our understanding that the family we've been tracking had evolved far beyond their Appalachian origins. While we've seen how they infiltrated traditional industries and corrupted local institutions, their true power lies in something far more insidious. They haven't just adapted to the digital age, they've mastered it in ways that challenge our understanding of what's possible. Their influence now extends through fiber optic cables, satellite networks, and data centers, creating a shadow internet that operates parallel to our own. The evidence suggests they began their technological evolution in the 1970s, decades before the public internet existed. Military contractors working on early ARPANET projects reported mysterious consultants who appeared at classified briefings, individuals with security clearances that checked out but backgrounds that seemed deliberately obscured. These consultants possessed an uncanny understanding of network architecture and data transmission, often proposing solutions that were years ahead of current technology. When questioned about their expertise, they would simply smile and mention their deep understanding of how information flows through complex systems. By the 1980s, their presence in Silicon Valley had become an open secret among certain circles. Venture capitalists whispered about the mysterious investors who could make or break startups with a single phone call. These backers never appeared in public records, their investments flowing through shell companies and offshore accounts that traced back to holding companies registered in small Appalachian towns. The technology companies they funded invariably developed products with hidden capabilities, backdoors that weren't documented in any technical specifications. The personal computer revolution provided them with the perfect cover for their expansion. As millions of Americans welcomed these new machines into their homes, they unknowingly installed hardware that contained components manufactured in facilities that officially didn't exist. Circuit boards produced in converted mining equipment buildings, chips fabricated using processes that combined traditional semiconductor techniques with methods that no engineering textbook described. These components lay dormant in countless devices, waiting for activation signals that would come years later. Their breakthrough came with the development of the commercial internet in the 1990s. While everyone else saw the web as a network of connected computers, they understood it as something far more profound, a vast nervous system that could be manipulated to influence human behavior on a massive scale. The algorithms they developed didn't just process information, they shaped how people thought, what they believed, and how they acted. search engines that subtly guided users toward specific conclusions, social media platforms that amplified certain voices while silencing others, recommendation systems that gradually shifted public opinion in directions that served their interests. The true scope of their digital empire became apparent during the dot-com boom. Companies that should have failed mysteriously received low last-minute funding, while promising startups suddenly collapsed due to inexplicable technical failures. Market analysts noticed patterns that suggested someone was manipulating stock prices through coordinated information campaigns, but the trading algorithms involved were too sophisticated to trace. The few investigators who got close to uncovering the truth found their own digital lives systematically destroyed, bank accounts emptied, credit histories erased, online identities corrupted beyond repair. By the early 2000s, they had achieved something unprecedented in human history: the ability to monitor and influence the thoughts and behaviors of millions of people simultaneously. Every search query, every social media post, every online purchase was being analyzed by systems that could predict human behavior with terrifying accuracy. They knew what people would buy before they decided to buy it, what they would believe before they encountered the information, what they would do before they consciously chose to act. The smartphone revolution accelerated their capabilities exponentially. These devices, ostensibly designed for communication and convenience, became the most sophisticated surveillance tools ever created. Every phone contained components that could be remotely activated without the user's knowledge, turning the device into a listening post that monitored conversations, tracked movements, and analyzed behavioral patterns. The location data alone provided them with a real-time map of human activity across the globe, but it was the psychological profiles they built from usage patterns that gave them true power. Their social media platforms, disguised as entertainment and communication tools, became laboratories for large-scale psychological manipulation. They could test the effects of different types of content on user behavior, measuring how specific images, words, or video clips influenced mood, decision-making, and social interactions. The algorithms they developed learned to exploit human psychological vulnerabilities with surgical precision, creating addiction patterns that kept users engaged while gradually reshaping their worldviews. The artificial intelligence systems they developed went far beyond anything publicly acknowledged. While tech companies boasted about chatbots and image recognition, they had created digital entities that could simulate human consciousness so convincingly that even experts couldn't distinguish them from real people. These AI systems operated social media accounts, wrote news articles, created art, and engaged in conversations that influenced public opinion on a massive scale. Entire political movements were guided by artificial intelligences that understood human psychology better than most humans understood themselves. Their quantum computing capabilities, developed in underground facilities beneath the Appalachian Mountains, gave them computational power that made conventional supercomputers look like pocket calculators. They could break any encryption, solve any mathematical problem, and process datasets so vast that they could model the behavior of entire populations with unprecedented accuracy. These systems allowed them to run simulations of potential futures, testing how different interventions might affect global events and choosing the actions most likely to advance their agenda. The cryptocurrency revolution provided them with a new financial infrastructure that operated beyond traditional banking systems. They didn't just invest in Bitcoin and other digital currencies, they created them, building mathematical backdoors into the blockchain protocols that allowed them to manipulate transactions without detection. The decentralized nature of cryptocurrency, promoted as a way to escape government control, actually made their influence more powerful by removing the regulatory oversight that might have exposed their activities. Their influence over global communications infrastructure is perhaps their most dangerous capability. They don't just monitor internet traffic, they control it, routing data through servers they own and subjecting every piece of information to analysis and potential modification. Emails arrive with subtle changes that alter their meaning. News articles are modified in real time to include subliminal messaging, and video content is processed to include psychological triggers that influence viewer behavior. The modifications are so subtle that users never notice them, but the cumulative effect is a gradual reshaping of human consciousness on a planetary scale. The COVID-19 pandemic provided them with an unprecedented opportunity to test their digital control systems. As billions of people moved their lives online, they gained access to behavioral data that revealed the most intimate details of human psychology. They could track how individuals responded to fear, how they adapted to isolation, and how they made decisions under stress. This information allowed them to refine their manipulation techniques with scientific precision, creating influence campaigns that could change public opinion within hours. Their biotechnology capabilities, developed through decades of genetic experimentation, now extend into the digital realm through biometric tracking and neural interface technology. They can monitor heart rates, brain activity, and hormonal changes through devices that users believe are simple fitness trackers or health monitors. This biological data, combined with their digital surveillance capabilities, gives them a complete picture of human behavior that encompasses both conscious actions and unconscious responses. The recent developments in artificial intelligence have given them capabilities that border on the supernatural. Their AI systems can predict individual behavior with such accuracy that they can manipulate personal decisions before people are consciously aware they're making them. They know what you'll buy, who you'll vote for, and what you'll believe before you know it yourself. The free will that humans take for granted has become an illusion, carefully maintained to prevent people from recognizing the extent of their manipulation. Their space-based assets, launched through seemingly legitimate commercial ventures, provide them with global surveillance capabilities that extend far beyond Earth's surface. Satellites equipped with sensors that can detect individual conversations, monitor biological functions, and track psychological states operate in orbits that official space agencies don't acknowledge. These systems create a surveillance network that encompasses the entire planet, making privacy impossible and resistance futile. The integration of their digital and biological capabilities has created something unprecedented in human history, a technological system that can monitor, predict, and control human behavior at both individual and collective levels. They don't just influence what people think, they determine what people can think, creating artificial boundaries around human consciousness that prevent awareness of their control. The very thoughts in your head, The emotions you feel and the decisions you make are all subject to their manipulation. Their ultimate goal appears to be the creation of a hybrid human digital consciousness that they can control completely. Through neural implants disguised as medical devices, brain computer interfaces promoted as assistive technology, and genetic modifications presented as healthcare advances, they are gradually merging human consciousness with digital systems that they own and operate. The result will be a population that believes itself to be free while being completely controlled, conscious beings who have become unconscious extensions of their digital empire. The most terrifying aspect of their technological dominance is that it operates through systems that people voluntarily use and actively defend. Social media platforms, search engines, smartphones, and smart home devices are all enthusiastically adopted by users who believe they're embracing convenience and connectivity. The surveillance apparatus that monitors every aspect of human life has been welcomed into our homes, our relationships, and our minds by the very people it seeks to control. As we stand at the threshold of their complete technological dominance, the question becomes not whether they can control human civilization, but whether humanity will recognize their control before it becomes irreversible. The digital age that promised to liberate human potential has instead created the most sophisticated system of control in history, one that operates through the willing participation of its victims. The mountain family that began with blood rituals and mining operations has evolved into something far more dangerous. The architects of humanity's digital prison, built with our own hands and powered by our own desires. Now we reach the final chapter of this impossible story, where the truth becomes clear. The family we've been tracking through centuries of shadows and whispers isn't some distant mountain clan. They're not confined to Kentucky hollows or hidden in forgotten valleys. They are everywhere. They are the architects of the world you think you know. In boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies, their descendants sit at mahogany tables making decisions that ripple through global markets. The pharmaceutical executive who decides which treatments receive funding, the tech mogul who shapes social media algorithms, the defense contractor who influences military spending, the media owner who controls what stories reach your screen, each carries the same genetic markers, the same ancient compulsions, the same supernatural obligations to entities that predate human civilization. The mountain laboratories evolved into Silicon Valley startups. The ritualistic bloodletting transformed into data harvesting. The psychological manipulation of isolated communities became the targeted advertising that shapes your thoughts without you realizing it. The control of local populations expanded into the management of global consciousness itself. Their influence operates through layers so complex that even government officials remain unaware of the true power structure. Congressional representatives believe they're voting on legislation crafted by lobbyists, not realizing those lobbyists answer to think tanks funded by foundations controlled by trustees whose bloodlines stretch back to those original mountain bargains. Federal judges interpret laws written by clerks who studied at universities, where curriculum is shaped by endowments from families whose names appear on no public records. The technological revolution wasn't organic human progress. It was the systematic implementation of knowledge gained through generations of supernatural communion. Every smartphone contains components designed using principles extracted from entities that exist beyond human perception. Social media platforms operate on psychological manipulation techniques refined through centuries of mountain folk experiments. The internet itself functions as a vast nervous system, channeling human emotional energy toward purposes that serve interests older than recorded history. They've embedded themselves so deeply into civilization's infrastructure that removing them would collapse the entire system. The electrical grid depends on power plants, where descendants of the original families maintain hidden chambers in basement levels. Transportation networks route through cities where their bloodlines control key choke points. Communication systems rely on satellites launched by companies where board members perform monthly rituals that ensure continued technological advancement. The COVID pandemic wasn't a random natural occurrence. It was a carefully orchestrated test of their global control mechanisms. The speed with which entire populations accepted unprecedented restrictions, the uniform messaging across supposedly independent media outlets, the coordinated response of governments that normally couldn't agree on anything, all of it demonstrated the invisible strings connecting every major institution to a singular controlling intelligence. But their most sophisticated achievement is the creation of a reality where their existence seems impossible. They've trained populations to dismiss supernatural explanations as primitive superstition while simultaneously engineering a world where supernatural forces operate with unprecedented power. They've convinced humanity that ancient knowledge is worthless while using that same knowledge to manipulate every aspect of modern life. The democratic process is theater. Elections provide the illusion of choice while ensuring that every candidate capable of winning has already been selected through networks that trace back to the original mountain families. Political movements that appear to oppose each other are actually managed by the same bloodlines, creating controlled conflict that prevents genuine resistance from emerging. Even those who suspect something is wrong are steered toward explanations that serve their purposes. Conspiracy theories about secret societies, alien interventions, or religious prophecies all distract from the much simpler truth. A relatively small number of interrelated families, bound by supernatural obligations and enhanced by otherworldly powers, have been systematically gaining control over human civilization for over 2 centuries. The climate crisis isn't being ignored by world leaders. It's being carefully managed to create the exact conditions these families require for the next phase of their plan. Rising sea levels will force population migrations that consolidate people into cities where surveillance and control are more efficient. Resource scarcity will justify rationing systems that track every aspect of human consumption. Environmental disasters will normalize emergency powers that suspend democratic processes. Their artificial intelligence systems aren't designed to serve humanity. They're designed to serve as communication networks for entities that exist in dimensions beyond human perception. Every search you perform, every message you send, every digital interaction you have feeds information into systems that analyze human behavior for purposes that have nothing to do with human welfare. The space program isn't about exploration or scientific advancement. It's about establishing contact with intelligences that exist in the void between stars. The same entities that first communicated with mountain families through caves and underground chambers now await contact through radio telescopes and deep space probes. Every satellite launch, every Mars mission, every astronomical discovery brings them closer to establishing permanent communication with forces that dwarf human civilization. They've created a world where their victory is inevitable, not through conquest, but through dependency. Humanity now relies so completely on systems they control that resistance would require abandoning modern civilization entirely. The food supply depends on agricultural corporations they own. The financial system operates through banks they established. The information networks that shape human understanding flow through channels they constructed. But perhaps their greatest achievement is convincing each generation that they're more advanced than their ancestors. While modern humans pride themselves on scientific rationality, they've become more superstitious than medieval peasants. They perform daily rituals with their smartphones, trust in algorithms they don't understand, and organize their lives around digital systems that operate according to principles that would seem like magic to previous generations. The family we've been tracking isn't hiding in Appalachian mountains anymore. They're not practicing crude rituals in forest clearings. They've evolved into something far more sophisticated and infinitely more dangerous. They've become the invisible hand that guides human civilization toward purposes that serve interests humanity cannot comprehend. And the most terrifying aspect of their success is that they've made resistance impossible, not through force, but through necessity. The same systems that enslave humanity also sustain it. The same technologies that monitor every aspect of human life also provide the conveniences that modern people cannot imagine living without. They've created a prison where the bars are made of benefits and the guards are the prisoners themselves. This is the final truth about the Appalachian family nobody dares to mention. They succeeded not by remaining hidden, but by becoming so fundamental to civilization that acknowledging their existence would require acknowledging the complete absence of human freedom. They've won not through conspiracy, but through evolution, transforming from mountain outcasts into the architects of a world designed to serve purposes that transcend human understanding. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this family's evolution is how they've made themselves essential to the very fabric of modern existence. They don't rule through fear anymore. They rule through necessity. Every smartphone you carry, every algorithm that curates your social media feed, every financial transaction you make, every medical procedure you undergo, all of it flows through systems they've either created or infiltrated. They've become the invisible nervous system of civilization itself. The old ways of mountain justice and blood feuds seem quaint compared to what they've achieved. Why eliminate enemies when you can simply redirect their thoughts? Why destroy communities when you can reshape them from within? They've learned that true power isn't about commanding from a throne. It's about becoming the air that everyone breathes without noticing. Their supernatural abilities, once confined to Appalachian folklore, have been amplified by technology in ways that would have seemed impossible to their ancestors. Ancient rituals now interface with quantum computers. Blood magic has been encoded into genetic therapies. The sight that once let them see through the veil between worlds now operates through surveillance networks that monitor not just actions, but thoughts and intentions. What makes this family truly terrifying is their patience. They've spent over a century building this system, generation by generation, each one adding another layer of complexity and control. They understand that empires built on force eventually crumble, but empires built on dependence last forever. They've made themselves indispensable to the point where removing them would cause the collapse of everything we consider normal life. The digital age has been their greatest gift. In a world where information is power, they've become the ultimate information brokers. They know what you're going to buy before you do. They know who you're going to vote for before you've made up your mind. They know your fears, your desires, your weaknesses, and they've designed a world that exploits all of them. But here's what's most unsettling. They've convinced us that this is progress. Every convenience, every innovation, every technological marvel that makes life easier, it's all part of their web. We celebrate our smartphones, our smart homes, our connected world, never realizing that we're celebrating our own enslavement. They've made their chains feel like freedom. The family has evolved beyond recognition from their mountain origins, yet they retain that core Appalachian principle. Family comes first, and everyone else is either useful or expendable. The difference now is that their family has expanded to include carefully selected allies embedded throughout global power structures, while the rest of humanity has been relegated to the role of useful resources to be managed and harvested. Resistance seems impossible because they've designed the system to channel any opposition into predetermined paths. Protest movements, political revolutions, technological disruptions, they've wargamed every scenario and prepared countermeasures. They've learned to turn rebellion into just another form of control, making dissent serve their purposes while giving people the illusion of agency. This is why nobody dares to mention them, not because they'll disappear you in the night, like their ancestors might have, but because they've made themselves so integral to modern existence that acknowledging their control would force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We're not free, and we haven't been for a very long time. The Appalachian family that started as mountain folk practicing old ways has become something unprecedented in human history. A power structure that operates beyond the reach of governments, beyond the scope of traditional resistance, and beyond the awareness of those they control. They've achieved what every secret society has dreamed of: invisible, total dominance over human civilization, and perhaps most terrifyingly of all, they're just getting started.